All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar. My name is Connor Kitko. I'm a marketing analyst at YCharts, and hosting our webinar today is my colleague Jared Fox, one of our account executives at YCharts. Today's webinar is Earnings Season, Don't Miss a Beat, during which we'll discuss how to leverage YCharts to stay on top of earnings and their impact on your investments. Throughout the webinar, we'll have a live Q&A via chat, where you can enter questions in the question section in the lower right corner of the webinar. We'll do our best to answer all questions in a Q&A session after Jared's demonstration, and any questions that are not answered during the Q&A session will be answered by your support contact. Please keep in mind that the content of this webinar is meant for educational purposes only and is not intended to be used as investment advice, nor is YCharts acting as an advising party regarding client funds in any way. Finally, as always, a recording of the webinar will be made available on the website and sent to all attendees. And now I'll pass it off to Jared to get us started.
Thanks, Connor, and thanks everyone for joining today. As Connor mentioned, we're right in the middle of earnings season, so what we thought would be beneficial is if we walked each and every one of you through today how to leverage your YCharts account to keep track of earnings season, whether it be on a portfolio level or an individual security level. We're going to focus on four main areas of the tool today. The first being the general watch list and dashboard setup. This is going to be where you can simply create a watch list of companies that you're tracking and gain insight into those that have already reported and those that are set to report. We're then going to take our workflow into our screening tool and show you ways to leverage the YCharts screener to find companies that are poised to trend upwards in terms of the estimate data that we have on each one of those. The third part of our workflow will move into the comp table section of YCharts, where you can take that list that we've created in our dashboard and further analyze different metric sets all focused on earnings. Lastly, we'll take our dive into a company quote page, show you which parts of that quote page are focused on estimates and earnings, and then show some visual data on one company versus another company to be determined through our workflow. With that said, let's jump into our account here and get going. All right, this is our dashboard, and as you can see right away, we've got some portfolio companies that I've created within my watch list here. They're all representative of companies that have recently reported their Q3 earnings and a few companies that are yet set to report here in the coming days and weeks. I want to talk about the watch list functionality here, and within that functionality, we're always going to be focusing on earnings and estimates data. First off, the tabs that are located in each and every watch list on YCharts. The overview tab giving the symbols as well as the company name and their recent price performance, as well as the data tab. If you click into your data tab in the YCharts account, you're going to be able to populate different columns of information here. Now you'll notice I set up each column to show first the sector of each respective company, as well as their last earnings release and their next earnings release. In this case, I have companies sorted by those that are going to report their Q3 earnings starting today through the end of the week. And then as you look down towards the bottom of our list here, these are companies that have already reported Q3, so that next earnings release is going to be their Q4 reporting date based off the estimation. If you notice at the top of each one of your watch lists, and my watch list here, we have an options dropdown. There's a few notable areas within the watch list dropdown to focus on here. In this case, I just want to simply show how to add a metric to a data view. So as mentioned, you can have 6 columns of data information in your watch list. In this case, we only have 3, so we have room to add at least one more. In this case, I'm going to come in here and use our predictive search functionality to pull in quarterly EPS surprise, which simply tells us that for each one of these companies, how much did they beat or miss their EPS quarterly estimates during that last reporting period. So for those that have yet to report Q3, it's going to be taking into the data that they reported for Q2. But for a company like Amazon down here towards the bottom, who's already reported their Q3 numbers, it's going to be a recent surprise, and you can see a big one at that. You can always switch around your informations here in columnized format and sort by any column. The next thing I'd like to do is jump to a part of the platform where you can find other notable companies that are set to report here this week and next week. If you focus on the data tab here at the top of my platform, I can go down to events calendar. And within the events calendar, there's a few worthwhile tools to mention here. First off, it's going to be the ability to select from a list. So instead of looking at the entire YCharts universe, if we're thinking about notable companies here, perhaps we're just wanting to focus our efforts on the S&P 500. So if I select a list, go down to indices, move towards the S&P 500, I can pull in a list of results for companies who are reporting earnings this week by unchecking all other event boxes and focusing purely on earnings. You'll notice that Cisco, Macy's, and an additional company to round out the S&P 500 will be reporting today. And then as I go over here on the left side of my panel, I can also sort through companies that are reporting tomorrow, Friday, and you can also toggle to previous week and next week at the top of that control panel. Anytime you want to return to your dashboard, you can simply go to the top left of the platform and click the YCharts logo. That's going to bring us back into our portfolio companies watch list. And what we're going to do here is now show how to place alerts on our company watch list based off of, in this case, earnings surprise. Alerts can be created via the options dropdown where we added that metric to data view earlier. We're now going to create an alert. Now, this functionality is going to create an alert on every company within our watch list. So right now, you already noticed that I have new events triggered. So anytime an announcement's made on when this company is going to report earnings or pay out dividends, our watch list is going to be triggered and our account notified. In this case, I used the example of earnings surprise earlier in the workflow here. Let's use it again, but this time as an alert setting. So what I want to say here is, let me know as a watch list follower, anytime one of the companies within my watch list beats their prior reported quarterly EPS estimate. If I click done, that's going to place an alert and let me know anytime that occurs. Now, where does that alert get sent to? It gets sent 2 places, and you have control over whether or not you'd like it to go to the second place. But first and foremost, it's going to go to your alerts area in your tool right down here at the bottom of my screen. So any alert that's triggered will show a red icon of 1, 2, 3, depending on how many alerts have been shown. And that's going to occur exactly when the alert hits our system. As a user, you also have the opportunity to receive alerts by email. These alerts can be sent daily, weekly, or as soon as possible. For me, on my account, I have alerts only going to my platform and never to my email. Speaking of emails and alerts and automation, I now want to direct our attention to one of the newest functional pieces that we have within YCharts. It can be found under the Tools dropdown, and it's called Custom Email Reports. What this application does is it enables our users to set predetermined modules of information based off of the watch list that they're following and have that information get sent straight to their inbox on a weekly or daily basis, once again determined by the user. In this case, what I've done is created and saved a module that I want sent to my account on a weekly frequency that's going to tell me what companies in the S&P 500 are set to report this week. In this earnings calendar email report, I'm also going to get dividend information, which we'll touch on here in a second. But this is the format to which it will get sent to my account. You can see that it's easy to understand on a monitor, but also if you were using it on a smartphone or a tablet, very functional and visual in that respect. So in this case, you see the companies that are set to report the week of August 15th through the 21st over the next 7 days, as well as their estimate based off of their quarterly EPS number outlined here on the right-hand panel. As I scroll down, another important event is oftentimes dividend payments. That will be included as well in this specific custom email report that I've created. And lastly, for the companies that I'm following and that are going to be reporting here soon, I've created a return summary, which can be added as a customizable feature onto your email report as well. These companies are going to be reporting earnings, either in the next couple of days, so it's nice to have a sense of what their returns have been in most recent time periods. Moving along here, the second part of our call is going to be dedicated to the equity screener and finding companies, as I mentioned, who are showing estimate data to be favorable as time goes on. If I scroll down to my equity screener, I'm able to start this analysis. A few quick points on the equity screener, right? When you come in here, you're given the entire universe of stocks. These two buttons right here, the Modify Equity Universe and the Add a Metric Filter, are ways that you as the user can narrow this universe and refine your results. In the Modify Equity Universe, you're going to see more qualitative focused options here. One of those that's pertinent to today's call would be the events section. So you can come in here, go to events, select upcoming earnings releases, and find every company that's set to report within the week, within 2 weeks, and within the month. On the same token, the Add a Metric Filter is going to be our quantitative metric. And in a second here, you're going to see a saved screen that shows a quantitative metric focused on earnings. But what it might look like is something like estimates for current quarter on an EPS level are less than the estimates expected for next quarter. And as I type that in, our system's going to refine our results. Clicking submit would then limit our universe to companies who have to at least fit that criteria. Having the ability to save screens within YCharts saves users a ton of time, so they don't have to come back in here and rebuild each time they want to run some analysis. I'm going to show you how quickly that can occur for someone who has a saved screen. As I open up my filters here, I've got a running dynamically updated list of companies, all of which are included within the S&P 500, whose quarterly EPS that was last reported is less than what the current quarter's estimates look like. And as we move further and further along to next quarter and the quarter after, the EPS estimates are always going to be increasing over time. I've got 42 companies here. I can sort by any one of my columns. If I want to know the company that reported the highest EPS based off of their last reporting date, I can simply click that column twice and find some companies. The last piece of the screener that I'd love to highlight is our scoring models functionality. This is a proprietary YCharts functionality that's extremely valuable to our users because when you're looking at 42 companies, it's hard to sort through each one of those in a timely manner. What the custom scoring model enables a user to do is focus a themed score and create a ranking system based off of different components. In this case, I pulled up a sample earnings score that I've created. It possesses 6 components, all of which are focused on EPS and EBITDA growth. You'll notice here that column on the left is the actual metric. The column in the middle is whether or not I prefer a higher or lower value. And the column on the right is used to determine the weighting or level of importance that each one of these components will pull towards for the entire score. If I simply add this metric set or scoring model, I can drag it over to be the far most left and easiest to visualize column and also sort by that column, 1 through 42. Oftentimes, it's just another layer of information to enable you not to have to dig through 42 companies, but put your own unique spin, whether it be earnings, valuation metrics, revenue growth, and sort off that. Moving along to part 3 of the workflow here, we're going to go into our comp tables tool. In this tool, we're going to bring back in the original list of portfolio companies that we had identified. And I can bring that list in by going to the List Browse button on my comp table set. You'll notice that you can bring in an entire watch list that you've already created. In this case, portfolio companies. And now I can plot out estimate and earnings type information within this set. A few of these I've created I really like, and I'll tell you why here in a second, but first we're going to start with the EPS estimates column set. First off, you'll notice this is all data. I want to show you the add info column functionality so that we can pair up some release dates with which this data coincides. I can plot last earnings release for each one of these companies. I can then go in and add the next earnings release. And this provides us not only a look back period of analysis, but also, a forward look as to what the analysts are expecting in the future. If we sort by our company here, we can pull Amazon up and provide an example through that company. As we scroll left to right here, you see that Amazon last reported on July 26th. During that period, they presented EPS of 5.07 per share, which was a 99% favorable earnings surprise during that period. We can also see that the next earnings release is October 26th. That will be their Q4 number. The EPS for that is lined out here, as well as the 7-day and 30-day percentage change, which simply represents that for this EPS period, the change in what the estimations are during that time period. So over the last 7 days here, the aggregate analyst estimates have downgraded that EPS by 0.81%. Now remember, we can always sort by our columns here and see which companies are set to report this week, as well as what the EPS estimate is, and whether or not they've been upgraded or downgraded in the last 7 days or 30 days. Another metric set that's oftentimes useful to take a look at would be the revenue estimates. And very much like the EPS, they can be viewed in the same exact context, but now on a revenue basis instead of EPS. So for Cisco, who's reporting today, you can see their last reported revenue number, whether or not they beat or missed their estimates. You can see their next earnings release, which coincides and is actually today, what they actually reported, and any revisions during the last 7 or 30 days for them. The last metric set that focuses on analyst estimates within YCharts is going to be our analyst views. And I'm going to get rid of my info columns here because now this just simply tells us that for every company we're looking at, here are the most recent buy, hold, sell, outperform, or underperform recommendations laid out by the analysts. We also have a column showing price target, as well as what that upside is. Sorting these columns, we can see which companies have the most outperform recommendations up to date by the analysts. We can also see companies that have the least amount of sell recommendations by the analysts. So you can sort by whichever column here. We focused our efforts earlier on Amazon in the example. Let's now move to part 4 of the workflow and go into the Amazon quote page. Within the quote page, you have a lot of information. Information on financial statements, key statistics, qualitative information about events and news, but you also have a good amount of estimate information within each quote page. So if we're doing an analysis on Amazon, on the home page right away, we can see the Amazon analyst coverage. Now we just came from a metric set that showed these buy-sell hold recommendations on 11 companies. Now we're just focusing on Amazon itself. We also have in our profile section of the quote page the next earnings release date, which is October 26th of 2018. Across the top of every quote page of a stock, we have different tabs here. Now, if we focus our efforts on estimates, we can actually jump into a tab dedicated entirely to estimates. Moving down the right-hand side of this page, you'll notice that we've got much of the same information that was included on that homepage, the analyst coverage, Amazon news, as well as the calendar, next announcement and last announcement. If we focus on the left side of this page, we get estimate data from the current period. So if we look across here, the top row showing EPS, the Q3 2018 estimate for Amazon, how much that has changed in the last 30 days, the year-over-year growth from their last estimate, and the past surprise when they reported on July 26th of an astounding 99%. You'll also get revenue, EBITDA, EBITDA margin under these same columns and time frequencies. We're also going to allow users in this quote page to look out to future periods. So Q4 of 2018 all the way through Q3 of 2019. What is the projected EPS for each one of those time periods? How many analysts are covering that number? As well as EPS gap, revenue, EBITDA, and EBITDA margin. Moving down here, we now have the prior period. So in the last period of earnings, what was the actual EPS, the estimate, the surprise, and the past surprise? All the way at the bottom, you'll have three visuals that really help to bring this information to light as well. The first one being the estimate trends versus the actual reported numbers on a quarterly revenue basis. So our blue bar is going to represent what the estimates and analysts had estimated for revenue during that time period, as well as what was actually reported for that company in orange. You can see here that Amazon has recently had a trend of beating revenue estimates dating all the way back to Q4 of 2016. Also, you'll notice that in the Q4s or latter half of the years, Amazon being a consumer cyclical stock, always taking a jump during those Q4 holiday periods. The second chart represents current period estimate revision history. So for Q3 of 2018, the blue line is going to represent revisions from estimates, and the orange line represents how that price reacted to those revisions. Any upgrade usually coincides with a spike in the stock price. Any downgrade usually coincides with a slight dip. The last visual on the estimates tab is going to be the long-term revision trends. So for each one of these periods, let's look back and see the trends, whether they be upgrade trends or downgrade trends for the revenue of Amazon during those time periods. I mentioned that we would now be taking our analysis into the visual fundamental charting tab for Amazon. Now you can enter the fundamental charting tab through our tools dropdown fundamental charts, or if you're looking at one particular company, you can just go straight there on a company quote page. It's automatically going to default to the price of the stock that we're looking at. In this case, though, we want to add metrics that are congruent with our analysis here, which is quarterly EPS. On the left side of my browser, I've got a control panel where I can simply type in the metric that we want to plot out on our visual chart here. And in this case, we're going to be looking at the actual reported quarterly EPS versus what the estimates looked like over the course of that time period. Using the time frame on the top of our chart, we're going to take our look to 3 years out and put a hard stop at 8/13 of 2018. So what we can see in this chart is that over the last several reporting periods, Amazon has consistently outperformed their EPS estimate number and that number has gone ever so up and to the right. How about a company that's competing ever increasingly with Amazon in the retail space, Walmart, who's set to report later this week? By adding a company to the securities bar, we can now do this comparison. The panel layout enables me to look at each company in their own respective panel. And now we can look at Amazon on the top of this analysis, Walmart on the bottom, and see, in this case, we've already analyzed Amazon, the fact that they've been beating their analyst projections and also progressing way up and to the right, where Walmart has been much more volatile in recent times and really has been hovering around the estimates that have been laid out for them. No major beats, maybe a few small ones, but pretty much congruent with what estimates have expected. That concludes our analysis and demonstration of today's webinar. Thank you again for joining. And with that said, I'm going to turn things back over to Connor for some Q&A.
All right. Thank you, Jared, for showing us all the ways that YCharts can be used to navigate earnings season. Before we jump into the Q&A, I do want to mention again that a recording of the webinar will be made available in the support topics section on YCharts.com. And then the next day or so, that will be made available in the next day or so. So if you want to review anything we went over or share it with any colleagues, the support topics section is where it can be found. Going into Q&A, the first question that we had come in, how far out do you have future earnings release dates? That's a great question. So until a company officially announces the date of their earnings release, the date that you'll see shown in YCharts is an estimated date based on that company's prior reporting dates. So for quarters that are far out from the current period, those dates are estimates, but they're fairly accurate. And then as soon as a company announces the actual date of their earnings release, YCharts will be updated to reflect that announcement. Next question, what is the source of the estimates data? So all of our estimates data is sourced from S&P Capital IQ. To the best of our knowledge, S&P gathers their data from Wall Street analysts and then aggregates all of those analyst numbers into a consensus figure for each company and category, and that consensus figure is what we show on YCharts. Third question, if an earnings revision is made, how quickly will it be updated on YCharts? So going back to S&P Cap IQ, as soon as our data provider updates with any revisions, our data will reflect that update. So as soon as S&P makes that revision, YCharts will update the number. We have time for one more question, and this final one isn't necessarily related to today's topic, but a good question nonetheless. We were asked, can you incorporate the Excel add-in to your next webinar? So we like to focus in the webinars on different clients' use cases and how our numerous YCharts tools can address their goals. If anyone ever has any feedback on a webinar or ideas for tools and workflows they want to see covered, they can actually submit those ideas via the survey link that's included in our follow-up email. And we'd be very excited to incorporate those ideas into future webinars. So once again, there's a link in the follow-up email, and you can submit any ideas via that survey. Okay, that concludes our webinar, and thank you everyone for joining and for your questions. Thank you, Jared, for leading the demonstration, and be on the lookout for that follow-up email, and we look forward to seeing you all next time.